Ladies and gentlemen, with changes taking place in legislation and issuing of conduct standards, guidance notes, and the move to Twin Peaks model of regulation, the industry probably has some questions about regulation on a practical level. In keeping constant with our mandate of being open, transparent, and accountable, we have to move to our Q&A session. The facilitator for the session is responsible for managing and leading the group legal strategy in terms of legal and regulatory matters within Alexander Forbes. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Fiona Rollason.
Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. That is quite a session to follow. That was very inspiring. Thank you very much, Juby. As you can see, my panel is busy preparing themselves. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. It's my Deborah Patter third degree moment. Though Olano doesn't like me being bossy when I'm at the FSCA offices, but there's no bars here, so I can be as bossy as I like. All right, we're going to run this session along the following way. All of the panelists, bar Olano, are going to give us a 10-minute maximum slide presentation on different departments within the FSCA. And the idea is that you all get an understanding of how the FSCA has structured itself, especially in light of its new mandate, market conduct regulator, and obviously post 1 April 2018. So each of them will go through by turn, telling us about their structure, their specific responsibilities in their departments, as well as the top of mind, work in progress, the issues that they're currently dealing with, and we should hopefully be seeing coming out of their various departments soon. Then we will move on to questions and answers. I have received quite a number of questions, so thank you for those who submitted them before the session. Some of them have actually already been answered through the course of the day, so I will probably try and prioritize those questions which have not already been answered, so we can try and get through as many of them as possible. So let me make sure I go through my panelists in the right order for their presentations. So Olano is not going to give us another presentation because, you know, he already has, although he will be up for answering the questions. First up will be Wilma Mokupo, who's going to speak about her area. Then Fikile Mosoma. Then Corlia Buitendag. Then Makgompi Raphasha, who may not be known to all of you, but if you are working in an administrator, this is the man that you need to know, because he is in charge of the 13B administrators. And then finally, Naheem Essop, who is obviously fairly well known to all of us now. So I'm going to sit down and let them all start speaking through their respective slides.
Thank you very much, Fiona.
Sorry, this would help.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have 4 teams within the Prudential Supervision Department. The Section 14 team that deals with transfers and terminations is led by Mamiki Mutale. The Special Projects team is led by Mrs. Portia Madle, and the Investment Performance team is led by Mr. Charles Pretorius, and the Financial Statements team is led by Mr. Khabe Khaka. I've just put a slide up just to give you just a high-level overview of the organogram within the department. So we report into the structure of the divisional executive, and then the 4 teams are comprised of analysts, various analysts at various levels of expertise, mainly from financial backgrounds. So that's just the snapshot of the department. So when you look at the transfers team, it's really very lean team, but very dynamic in terms of the volumes and complexity of the transfers that they actually handle. So when we look at the transfers team specifically, they look at the oversight of conversions and amalgamations and liquidation. The team also works closely with our units in the licensing department to make sure that the state of the funds are correct. When we look at the financial statements team, obviously the audited annual financial statements that also have statistics and audit reports are looked at there. And again, I just put up some latest stats for us in terms of where we're sitting at 2018 figures. And as I heard yesterday from the team, the 2019 figures are already creeping up close to the 5 trillion rand mark. But this includes GPF, Transnet, Telkom, and the post-offered funds and TIPF that we don't currently regulate. But for those who've read the COFI bill, you will know what is being proposed there. In terms of the investment performance team, now as I said, we're becoming more intrusive and intensive, more proportionate and forward-looking, and so we're really looking at the investment performance of funds. And as you can see, it's not called a costs team. It's actually the investment performance team. And here we're monitoring compliance with the investment requirements in terms of the current Regulation 28 and the asset allocations. And this team also has started engaging the Financial Surveillance Department of the SARB and the Financial Stability Unit. So there's a lot of statistical information that we are already sharing with our twin, the South African Reserve Bank, in terms of the statistics of investments and drilling down to the various asset classes. So a lot of discussions internally and externally in that side. Then we've got the special projects team, who also are looking specifically at being more of an early warning for our analysis, and really they'll be looking in the not so distant future at cash flow statements, because as we said, cash is still king, and we need to catch some of these concerns and challenges that we're facing early. And of course, members are ultimately asking us the question, are you watching the money? And so this team will specifically look at cash flow statements, but in addition to that, they will also have special projects to look at areas within the industry where we believe there are certain concerns and risks that are emerging. And this team also works very closely with our regulatory support function, as well as our regulatory policy function in terms of looking at benchmarks in the near future, publishing those benchmarks and averages, and hopefully we will find the necessary collaboration from people in this room, from the whole gambit of trustees through to academics and so on. So we're really looking forward to those collaborations so that we start publishing this information to deal with the knowledge gap. So that's just high level on the activities that we actually deal with. And I think in the financial statements, you're all fully aware of the detail that it actually does go into. And we will be reviewing those notes to the financials in terms of how do we report on sustainability, BBBEE, and so on. And then finally, the investment performance team will also be looking at revising the quarterly asset allocation reports or Regulation 28 reports, looking more specifically at member level compliance, because this is becoming quite a concern. Even after so many years of the revised Regulation 28, we're very concerned in that area, looking at mandates and again looking at benchmarks in the investment space. And then again, just in the special project side, cash flow statements, the early warning, cost structures, disclosures, and again, basic research. And then just some of the things that we are currently working on. So you would have all seen the newly published conduct standard on transfers. So we're all busy with the transitional process up to January next year to get everything up and running. And then the revised regulatory reporting framework that actually tells you how to account for the assets. That will lead into the revised format for the notes in the financials. And then what we've been asking in the imminent withdrawal of the audit exemption, because all funds are important, all members are important, doesn't matter the size of your fund. I've mentioned the cash flow statements and the quarterlies, and then the next one that you should be seeing us workshopping would be the liquidations standard, where we will combine all the various aspects of the liquidations, because it's spread across quite a few board notices. So it will be a real place to go for liquidations just in general. But all of this, of course, has to go through the iterative consultation processes with public comments from yourselves. Okay.
We're going to slightly change it. We're going to slightly change it because I think it's clearer for you if the speaker stands here. So, Fikile, you're next.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Introducing the lien reviews and authorizations, previously known as licensing and registration. So after the 1st of October last year, the department split, and the licensing part is now with the licensing team under the different divisional executive. And the supervision of administrators is now with my colleague, Makgompi. The team, I'm the head of the department with an assistant and 3 managers. The 3 managers are allocated administrators looking at the size and the volumes, trying to balance them out. And we have analysts who are responsible for everything that those managers are responsible for. With regard to our responsibilities, you will notice that now Section 4 of the Pension Funds Act is no longer on the list. We are now responsible for Section 7B exemptions, Section 10 applications, rule amendments, revisions, consolidations of rules in terms of Section 12, and consideration of and approval of Section 13A applications, receipt and consideration of applications for termination of participating employers. May I request that you excuse the repetition there, then cancellation of registration of funds in terms of Section 27. Now, you may be asking yourself why there's a termination of participation for participating employers. Why? Because employers are not registered in terms of Section 4, so we do not cancel them in terms of Section 27, only for funds that are Section 27. Then we have consideration and approval of extension of periods, Section 37D, and acknowledgement and recording of condition for applications. So, before I get to the next slide, I would like to highlight some of the issues that we have come across when we're dealing with some of these applications. Condition 4. There are issues because we get notices. Okay, condition 4 is transfer movement of one fund from one administrator to another. We'll get applications that are outdated, and there is a ripple effect when we come to levy period. For example, currently I'm considering refunds and debit notes or credit notes because we are only notified very late during the process of transfer. Our levy period is as a specific date, and that date has gone past. Now we must consider, because notices come way after. Now, because administrators of funds feel they cannot pay levies because they are no longer administered by a particular administrator, it becomes a problem. Exemptions. I know Corlia will touch on exemptions that are submitted late. Exemptions in terms of Section 7B. There was a period when we granted these exemptions for 1 year. We reviewed that. We issued a notice, and we made provision for time-bound as well as indefinite exemptions. But there is still a challenge for funds to submit on time. I know the FSR Act says you can submit on or after, even though the previous exemption has expired. But then, for funds, it means when you are late, a Section 26 must be effected. So we are requesting that please help us submit on time. Then, what am I working on? Currently, I receive determinations from the pension funds adjudicator regarding certain funds that are bound by sectoral determinations. What happens here is funds or participating employers will go register in another umbrella without getting the exemption that's required in terms of the rules of the fund that is governed by a sectoral determination. Then what happens is, because that permission wasn't granted, when there is a complaint to the pension funds adjudicator, we get a beating because we failed to honor the sectoral determination. I think you know by now which one I'm talking about, the private security. In the past month, I entertained about 6, 7 determinations, and in each of those cases, the pension funds adjudicator will raise an issue. Why do you continue registering these funds or employers under other under umbrella funds when you know that without an exemption, you just cannot? These people or these employers are bound to participate in the PSSF or PSSPF. So, we are currently considering a guidance note that will request additional information. As part of the registration or approval process, what we will indicate on the notice will determine if you do get approval or not. We are requesting, 1, the CIPC registration number. If you do change a name as a participating employer, we will request the certificate as well as confirmation. 3, we will request that you describe the type of business as contained in the CIPC certificate of registration. That will assist us in determining whether you should obtain exemption and be registered in another fund, or you go straight to the sectoral determination fund. That's the one. So the document is in advanced stage. We will be issuing it very soon, I think in the next week or so. Unfortunately, we are adding as well that applications that are already submitted, funds must go back and obtain that information before we can even start considering those applications. The next document that we're working on, the review of Directive 5. Section 8.5 of the PFA has created challenges, and Corlia will touch on it as well. So we are working together to review and improve it so that the appointments that we make are genuine, because we have discovered that at times we will verify from my side a PO only to find that later on there was certain information that was not disclosed to us. Then the PO, when questioned, they will raise, but you verified me. So we are working on Directive 5 to improve it. The big one. Review of Circular 2 of 2017. Olano already touched on it earlier today. We are engaging the auditing profession, and we have received comments on the additional information that we want to introduce. It will come in a form of an AUP, and it will be an annexure in addition to the circular. And the plan is to convert the circular into a guidance notice. I know initially the January document we said we will withdraw, but considering the content and what we're bringing in addition, we felt it strongly to change it to a guidance note and add the AUP. And that's it from me. Thank you.
I'm going to do it a little bit different than my colleagues. I'm going to start off by with the responsibilities that that my department's responsible for, and then I'm going to tell you how we're structured. So, as you all know, I'm Corlia Buitendag. I'm the head of the Conduct Supervision Department. Our responsibilities is to conduct on-site inspections. On-site inspections. Now, previously it was on-site visits. I know the industry is a bit tense. It's not an inspection as in the past. The active might just some changes in the meaning is the same, so it's still an on-site visit, but it's just now an on-site inspection. So inspection is now, what was previously in the Inspection Act, is now investigation. So we responsible for the implementation of the risk-based supervisory framework for retirement funds. We deal with conduct-related complaints. We deal with the RIs, whistleblowing reports, referrals from other departments, appointments of Section 26 trustees, curatorships. We involved with regulatory actions, Section 13A contraventions, and then we're going to host theme-based workshops with retirement funds. Again, as you've heard during the day, the key principles that we, to supervise the industry that we need to adhere to is we need to be preemptive, proactive, risk-based and proportional, intensive, intrusive, transparent and consultative. Okay, so this is now how we structured the department to adhere to all these principles. You will see all these tasks that was our responsibility, and the allocated staff that was allocated to the department was only 25 staff members. So we really have to work risk-based, proportional, to comply with these key principles. So we decided to structure the department into 3 teams. The first team will be, fund inspections. It will be small and medium funds. This is a new one for you, but I will address it later on. It's market conduct returns, conduct planned visits, participate in still the outreach programs, and overseeing all the unclaimed benefit funds, dealing with complaints, but that's now more on smaller funds. And it's high-risk funds if using Wilma's early warning system and the calculation that out of the financial statements, this team will focus on that. Investigations on reportable irregularities and special products. Then team 2, unit 2, you've seen them all. I think the large funds have experienced that. We've conducted on-site visits or on-site inspections on all these funds. It's more like a meeting. It's for us to determine the risks and to understand the fund better. They will also deal with the market conduct returns, but that we'll address later on, and ad hoc complaints. Then, the next one. That's the unit, if you hear distressed. So that's now my distressed department. I deal with all the curatorships, Section 26 appointments. I feel very sorry for these people because currently there are 3,026 appointments on 1,600 funds. So they need to deal with all the supervision of all these appointments. So they've got a vast task to do. We're looking at changing our electronic system so that the Section 26 can report to us electronically. Then, Then the department assists with regulatory and enforcement action. We've been criticized in the past that we do not apply a consistent approach when taking regulatory action. So in terms of our structure and the regulatory framework that we're starting to design, there's an internal committee that consists of our general counsel, the head of staff members of the enforcement department, the inspectorate investigation unit, and Olano, our DE, chair the meeting. The staff who's dealing with the matter will present the case to the Regulatory Action Forum. We will call it RAF1, where the case is presented to them. We will discuss all the facts, and then the regulatory action will be decided there. The staff member will go back, write a letter to the relevant person or regulated entity or the fund, get a response, so we will give them the necessary audi. They will come back with a response, agreeing or disagreeing with us. Then we have our RAF2. So that's a meeting where the same people who sat at RAF1 will then look at the response. And then we will decide, are we agreeing, are we dismissing the response, or are we going and issue or take the regulatory action. Okay, so the type of regulatory instruments that's available to us is enforceable undertaking, issuing a directive, or issuing an administrative penalty, debarment of removing of key persons. You would have seen, if you visited our website, there's quite a few enforceable undertakings that we've issued. Okay, work in progress. We're busy issuing a conduct standard for Section 13A. I know you've been waiting and we've been talking about it for a long time, but it's almost in finality. Then the big one, I just want to see if the big one that I've alerted a lot of the top 100 funds that we've already conducted on-site inspections on. I did alert them to that. It's now the market conduct return. So this is going to be a return. We're still deciding if the governance return and the market conduct return is going to be one return, but it's going to be submitted annually to us. It won't be an extra layer of fees because your chairperson and the principal officer will sign it off, verifying the information. This return will focus on conduct risks. So we will structure it to say yes, no, or not applicable, and there can be that there's questions. So it's all conduct. So it's the impact on your member. What will influence you or not paying your members' benefit? What will have a negative impact on your members? So that's a type of questions. It's a yes, no. It's not there's no calculations. We can ask you here or there's just a number or a figure, but it won't be calculations, nothing that needs to be audited. Okay.
So the size of the font is deliberate.
Yeah, because it's a secret.
Okay. Afternoon, everyone. Perhaps I should start by introducing myself. I feel a little bit under pressure because when Fiona introduced us, he says I'm not known to this audience, and that is indeed so. I'm also used to speaking to audience at other conferences, but this is a different audience, and I feel very honored to be speaking at a conference where there are comrades. Is really the first time to me. It's a new experience, and I hope it will really go well. With the Twin Peaks, then obviously retirement funds administrators are no longer supervised in the retirement funds division of the FSCA. They have moved to conduct of business, and hence I am standing here being responsible for the supervision of 13B administrators. So by way of agenda, in brief, I'm going to touch on the conduct of business division. I'm not part of the retirement fund division, so you'll see on the organogram when they have got a DE at the top, they are referring to Olano, but I'm not referring to Olano in the organogram that you will see. So I'm going to touch a little bit on the departments that are in COB, in the conduct of business division. Then I'm going to talk about the department itself. The department has got two sections. You have got the insurance section and the administration section. Then obviously you're more interested in the administration section, so I will focus on that for the purpose of this audience. And I'm going to talk about our liaison activities, not to be outdone by my colleagues. They have all touched on that, so I felt that I also need to have that in my slides as well. And then regulatory developments. So, firstly, the division, the conduct of business division is responsible for looking after all financial institutions, except retirement funds, and then except market infrastructures that are being looked at in other divisions. So it is a division that puts emphasis on treating customers fairly, and then we look at products right from the beginning until the end of the life cycle. You have got various departments in this division. The first one is banks and payment providers. It's a new department. The FSB was not responsible for looking after banks, but with the Twin Peaks, we are now look after the conduct of banks. Hence, we have got a department called banks and payment providers. The next department is my department, which is responsible for supervising insurance companies and 13B administrators. And the rationale for supervising insurers and 13B administrators from one department is really, as you know, most of the insurance companies are also 13B administrators. So it makes sense when you supervise to supervise the entire entity. Then the other department is micro and access products institutions. It's looking at micro insurance. It's also in COB. Financial advisors and intermediaries is a department that previously you will have known it as the FACE department. Investment providers, looking at investment providers. Your investment administrators will also be looked at there. We are looking at benefit administrators in my department. And then we have got the FICA supervision, which we still have to establish. I think in terms of our business plan, we have until this month to establish that department. So what does the department do? So the department, as I've said, is divided into two units. You have got the insurance team, and then you've got the 13B team. So In terms of the structure, you've got the divisional executive at the top, as I've said, it's not Olano. This is Kidiboni Dikokwe at the top. Then you've got head of department, it's me. Then the first 4 teams, those are your insurance teams. They are responsible for supervising all insurance companies, even those that form part of groups, long-term and short-term, or life or non-life, which is the terminology that we use these days. Then the last team, obviously, is the administration section. It has got a manager, it has got 2 specialists, and then it has got 2 senior analysts, and then 2 analysts, although we are still recruiting for certain positions. So the insurance team is responsible for looking after all insurance companies, as I've said. Is also responsible for the supervision of advice and intermediary services offered by insurers. So as you know, most of the insurance companies are also FSPs under the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act. So my department is responsible for looking at that as well. So the 13B team, this is a new team that was established on the 1st of October 2018. So it's less than a year old. It has got a manager, currently 1 specialist analyst, 2 analysts, and then we are recruiting for other positions. It looks after about 140 active benefit administrators. What is the role of this team? We do a number of things. We do conduct on-site inspections of administrators. We do desktop analysis. I'm not going to go through all the activities, but the one that I want to highlight, which is going to be very key, and we are already using it very effectively on the insurance side, is the last one. Periodic engagements, meetings with senior management. That is a very useful tool that we have used, where now, as 13B administrators, you can expect us a visit from us where we're going to request to form part of your meetings where real issues are being discussed that affect your business, because we cannot supervise effectively if we don't understand your business. So we'll be sitting in meetings with you where issues are being discussed, and then we hope that also through these meetings we'll be able to understand your businesses much better. We are also involved in the development of legislation. We are responsible for other activities, including approval of mergers and acquisition of 13B administrators. And just on the regulatory developments, this is the area that I think I want to focus on. So as you know, Board Notice 24 of 2002 was published many, many years ago. We are busy reviewing that board notice. It's going to be published as a conduct standard. There are a number of things that you will see when we issue it for comments that are not currently in the current directive, Board Notice 24. So there are issues, for example, an issue like outsourcing, which is not dealt with in the current board notice. We're going to deal with it. And listening to the discussions this morning, for example, on the topic of fees, there you will see that one of the things that we're going to propose is that where an administrator is going to outsource some of the administrative functions, then it cannot do that without the consent of the funds that will be affected. And it will also, if there are additional fees that will be payable as a result of the outsourcing, then the funds concerned, the funds being under the administration of that 13B administrator, they should consent to those additional funds. So there are other issues that we're going to touch on as well in this standard. For example, an issue of systems, we're going to deal with it extensively in the conduct standard, because the issue that has been discussed here of unclaimed benefit funds, as you know, there are various reasons why unclaimed benefit funds exist, but one of the reasons is due to poor administration and record keeping by certain administrators and funds. So we're going to really have a requirement on proper systems, but obviously that will have to be fit the size and the nature of your business as well. So there will be an element of proportionality when it comes to that. So the fitness and propriety requirements of directors and the key persons will also be dealt with. And then we're going to also deal with governance issues as well in the conduct standard. And then lastly, we're going to issue a guidance notice. This guidance notice, it was issued on TCF. And I think if you say to me, I think we are a little bit behind on this, I wouldn't really argue with you because I'm also involved on the insurance side. And I know that most of those TCF principles on the insurance side, we have already incorporated them into our subordinate legislation. If you look at the PPRs, most of those principles have already been incorporated. So perhaps we are lagging behind in this state and B space, but this is what we are doing. So it's going to be issued again for the next rounds of consultation, and then we're going to get comments on that. So the TCF principles, I'm not going to go through all of that. I think you know that by heart, but they will form part of that. So thank you very much.
Fund governance and trustee conduct. This is a new department that's been established in the FSCA. It's one that did not exist in the old FSB, so it's one of the ways in which the regulator has evolved. And our responsibilities are, as the name suggests, to look after the governance of funds and the conduct of trustees. So there's no real marks for getting that one right. We are also responsible for ensuring compliance with the default regulations and developing trustee training initiatives. We provide legal support to the division. In other words, whenever a legal issue arises within the division, then we provide them with legal assistance, but when matters get really serious, then we have to go to the Office of the General Counsel, which is an entirely separate division. So this department is also responsible for putting together the Retirement Funds Conference, which we are attending here today. However, we did not do this alone. We did it with the full support of the other departments within the division. Insofar as the departmental structure is concerned, the department is made up of a departmental head who reports to the divisional executive, Mr. Makhubela, and reporting to the departmental head is a manager, and reporting to the manager is a specialist analyst and a junior analyst. Our departmental head will be commencing on the 1st of October, and we are in the process of recruiting for the other positions that are vacant at the moment. Some of the activities that we have done during our short existence as a department relate to the processing of default regulations and extensions for compliance with the default regulations. As you can see from the slide, the majority have been processed, so if you're still waiting on us, you are in the minority. We've issued a guidance notice on the default regulations, as well as we've granted certain general exemptions from the default regulations. We've also issued an industry communication regarding hybrid annuities, and that we will look at accepting an exemption that can enable a hybrid annuity to exist within the default regulation space. Insofar as the governance return is concerned, that is a work in progress. Trustee training, we are currently working with certain stakeholders on the professional trustee qualification, but this is also a work in progress. And some of you may have seen the draft conduct standard, which makes the trustee toolkit compulsory for trustees to complete. We've received the comments, and it's currently under consideration. Once it becomes a standard, we will be responsible for ensuring compliance with that standard. So we're not really concerned so much with the content of but we want to make sure that trustees are complying and are completing the trustee toolkit. We also intend hosting a number of workshops each year. We held our first workshop in May this year. It was, by all accounts, a successful workshop. And we will be hosting more workshops in the years to come. And as an ongoing function, we monitor trustee conduct, and where necessary, we take enforcement action against trustees. This includes the removal of trustees and principal officers when this becomes necessary. I mentioned before that we are mandated to provide legal support to the division. We assist with the drafting of regulatory instruments and guidance notices. We have also initiated quarterly meetings between our office and the Office of the Pension Funds Adjudicator. And that's really just an opportunity for us to gossip about you and understand what are the concerns of the adjudicator in respect to certain pension funds, which may lead to a regulatory action being taken. We also participate in a technical team responsible for the alignment of the Pension Funds Act together with the COFI bill. We've done in-house training on the default regulations. And lastly, as I've already said, we have arranged this workshop, but I'm man alone in the department at the moment, so full support from my colleagues, which has been truly appreciated. Okay, thank you.
Right, I'm now in the driving seat, Olano. I have not discussed this with the Madam Program Director, but by a kind of show of hands, how would everyone feel if we just push on, don't skip the tea breaks, push on for another 30 minutes, and then you can always have a cup of tea or coffee or leave. Does everyone, are there violent objections to that? Right, okay, let's push on. Is that all right? The Madam Director's giving me the thumbs up. Okay. All right. Olano's been pretty quiet. So, the boss. These are questions that have been sent through, but obviously there will be an opportunity for the audience to ask questions as well. Olano, one of the questions that came through was, we know in October 2018 you issued your strategy document. And we've had discussion this morning or this afternoon about how the departments have been set up. But can you talk a little bit about how the organizational structure aligns with the strategy and talk specifically more about the strategy that was outlined at a fairly high level in your strategy document and how you plan to actually implement the strategy?
Okay.
And a lot of it has been covered by the likes of transformation already. This morning we have had some discussion on that.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Fiona. So I'll try and keep it very brief. So I think the key issue to appreciate is that as FSCA we've moved away from an entity-based regulator to more of a function-based regulator. And so if you look at our genogram, you no longer have insurance department, you no longer have CIS department. Of course, the only exception, actually two exceptions, is for retirement funds and also markets. So the aim is to try and regulate more for activities rather than the entity itself. And this is part of this drive to regulate at a conglomerate level. Because as you would be aware, South Africa has a lot of conglomerates. So you've got banking groups which are also doing insurance business and all other business, because interesting enough, banks feel they can do anything in the world. So to ensure that there are no issues which fall between the cracks because you happen to be an insurer, we thought that approaching regulation from a functions approach will help. So it shouldn't matter that you are an insurer and you are doing activities which might fall in banking or might fall in retirement. We should be able to catch and regulate for those activities. So I think that's the main drive. The regulatory strategy document we've issued talks to a number of points. So how best can we deliver on our mandate? It deals also with how can we transform effectively from an old entity-based institution to a function-based institution. It talks about financial literacy and education. It talks about transformation, as you have highlighted, Fiona. So I think whatever we do now, it's pretty much informed by the strategy document. If that answers the question, I would appeal to people to actually go through the strategy document, because it's actually very interesting and it gives you quite a lot of details in terms of our strategy for the next 3 years.
And do you think your organization and your staff are empowered and knowledgeable enough about regulating in a principles-based environment rather than a rules-based?
So that's a very good question. So the challenge with principles is that they require a lot of judgment. Rules are easy to enforce because a rule is what it is. If you say to someone you can't invest in equity beyond 75%, there's really nothing to debate there. It's very explicit. If you say to someone, when you undertake investments, you must consider also ESG aspects, it becomes a different issue. So you are right. It does require a mind shift. It does require some training internally. And actually the HR unit has been embarking on this training of our staff to ensure that we deliver on the mandate. It will take a while, because as I say, it is a mind shift. I mean, we are also trying to build this system which in a way will help us in terms of deploying artificial intelligence and assessing some of the trends and being able to be proactive. So that will help also in the risk-based approach, so that we don't spend a lot of time on areas which are not posing problems. We are able to focus on the critical areas. So it's something we are working on. It will take time, but I think we'll get there with sufficient training and experience.
I think you're not alone. It's obviously not just for the regulator, the industry and funds as well. You know, it's a shift from a compliance, rules-based approach. So it is a journey for all of us. I'm going to move on to Directive 8, because, you know, we can't get through the whole day without talking about Directive 8. And we got a lot of questions on Directive 8. And I think really the main thrust of it, and this is either for Corlia or Naheem, whoever's brave enough to answer the question, but the main gist of the questions was, has it made a difference? Have there been many reports, whistleblowing reports submitted to the FSCA, and has any action been taken against service providers, principal officers and trustees? There was obviously a feeling behind this question that there's actually not enough being done, and that there are still activities being done, you know, that are now prohibited. So really, what has the experience been?
Okay. So we did take action on quite a few cases. All the cases are available. It was enforceable undertakings. It's all available on our website for if you want to look at them. And there are a number of other cases that we're busy investigating and communicating with investigating parties. What I would like to just raise, I think people read Directive 8 maybe not thoroughly. They're more focusing on functions, gifts, traveling, but they forgot about one specific clause is on Directive 8, item 4A. Any gratifications which objectively viewed created a conflict of interest with their fiduciary duty towards the fund. And we've seen now there's a large number of big funds, umbrella funds, where the principal officers in full-time employment with either the sponsor or the administrator. So you will now see we're taking action. We're entering into enforceable undertakings with the fund and to correct the non-compliance.
Fiona, if I can add, I mean, I've said this before, Directive 8 is not going to go away anytime soon. So do your best to get used to it. And honestly speaking, you shouldn't be worried if you know you're not doing something problematic out there, honestly speaking. So the fact that there might still be an issue around Directive 8 is a bit worrying. And I really would like to stress that, you know, this is not a witch hunt. There are issues we have picked up in the industry. We are not going to name and shame people here, and maybe we should start doing that in the future. So understand where we are coming from, and honestly, if there's nothing wrong you have done, you really should not be too worried about Directive 8.
Well, I'm going to ask you the next question, and I am just reading a question that was submitted. I think the answer is fairly self-explanatory, but the question has been put. So obviously the view when you're reading Directive 8 is that entertainment, overseas trips and the like are prohibited if they're paid for by a service provider. So is it okay from the regulator's point of view if the fund just pays for all those overseas trips and entertainment?
I will pass it on to my lawyer, Mr. Essop.
So one of the things that my boss likes to say a lot is the problem with lawyers is that they're too legal. So the thing is that, yes, we expect the fund to bear its own expenses. We don't expect the fund to be spending money lavishly on entertaining trustees, but if there's a necessity for a trustee to go overseas, then that expense must be paid for by the fund. I know it's a cost that is being borne by the members, but I think independence and not being influenced unduly is of greater value than what the cost of that trip would be.
The test is probably if you be prepared to stand in front of all of your members and tell them how much you spent and what you did and where you stayed and what you ate and see how they feel about it.
Then don't do it.
I know, but if you're not prepared to do it.
So unless really there's a good case for you to take trustees and maybe you want to do an on-site inspection of some of your investments, I would really adopt a much more conservative approach. I mean, these are really workers' savings and we shouldn't be using them for entertainment.
And I think the trustees going overseas need to understand when they come back, they need to write a formal report. Not the consultant or the service provider that accompany them for the due diligence. They need to prepare the report and they need to actually inform their fellow trustees of the investment and if it's a good investment or not.
All right, and there is one final question on Directive 8, just about early detection. Is there any mechanism that the FSCA has in your armory to have early detection? I'm not sure if Wilma can respond to that one.
So yes, Fiona, as you've heard me say, that we will be looking at cash flow statements, so we will be catching it as soon as it goes out. And we will be expecting those reports to come in rather quickly. so that we can actually engage the fund on those issues. And that cuts across all the net inflows and outflows within the fund, making sure the contributions come in, making sure the investment returns come in, making sure that you don't end up paying for one expense in 1 month and you skip your risk premiums in the other, because that also leaves members destitute. But we also heard this morning how costs of just 1% can eat away up to 30%. So again, is that trip really necessary? If you're just going to say, oh, this is the building we're investing here in London, now you can go off to Piccadilly Circus and enjoy yourselves.
There was a question that was submitted about people not being aware of any action being taken against anyone, but Corlia has answered that by, it's well worth actually looking on the website and seeing there the regulatory action that has been taken in certain circumstances. And another question came in about, how do you ensure consistent regulatory action is taken and fair regulatory, action, that it's not somebody that you don't like, and that there is some element of process and administrative justice that goes on. And they've spoken about the RAF, the Regulatory Action Forum. So there is a process around that. There was a question also, and we did touch on it earlier. Mr. Pele asked a question around whether the current limits in Regulation 28 with regard to private equity and hedge funds, whether that limit should be increased. I know that Naheem said it wasn't on the cards, but I think Wilma wanted to add a comment to that about, the actual limits that apply across not only private equity and hedge funds, but also unlisted investments. And also I'm quite interested to hear, we have those limits already in the Reg 28. Do funds go to the max as it is? Sorry, and I have put you on the spot there. But
Yes, no problem, Fiona. And I think this is something that we have been debating for some time in terms of when markets are flat, where do you go? Do you go to the alternative asset classes where there can be maybe more growth and more returns? And besides that, it obviously has sustainability factors when you're investing in these small upcoming businesses and enterprises. But again, just going quickly back to the limits, again, we know that what the hedge fund and private equity limits are. But when you look at the alternative asset classes, including the other 2.5%, it's all collectively 15%. And if you add to that the unlisted property, the unlisted equity and unlisted debt, you can almost double that amount. And so there is a lot of scope within Reg 28. And my team provided me with some numbers just yesterday, and we have, the trend is still there, that funds are still very much reluctant to use the full exposure to private equity and hedge funds, even though they know, for example, hedge funds are being regulated now under the Collective Investment Schemes Act. So we want to know what would be the reasons for that reluctance. Similarly to the foreign asset allocations, funds are generally not going over their limits. Here and there might be some outliers, but generally we find funds are quite prudent in looking at these alternative asset classes. So there is still scope and room for improvement. We will try and publish some of these figures shortly, not as an annual report, but maybe as a bulletin of some sort, so that academics and industry and members alike can just interrogate the figures. But the allocations are there. The question might be, are the investment asset management philosophies aligned with the fund's investment policy philosophies and statements?
Thank you, Wilma. A question again for Olano. We spoke earlier about transformation, and particularly in the asset management area and incubation programs and that kind of thing. Would the regulator, National Treasury, potentially be open to having a round table with existing large, well-established, maybe traditional asset managers and challenge them on the issue of transformation to see if there's a way forward?
Certainly. We've always been open to discussion, and maybe that's something worth considering if we can call a round table together with the policymaker and the industry, specifically asset managers, and see how this can be crystallized and operationalized. So definitely, it's something we are open to. All
right. Back to Naheem. with so many legal changes happening, and we know that different pieces of legislation have got different effective dates, and some of them have been postponed again, and the overriding principle is, it's quite difficult for trustees to sometimes get tripped up inadvertently because of the multiple changes and multiple effective dates of different changes. So the question is the overriding principle still that the trustee's fiduciary duty, and if that has been discharged, but some regulatory red tape has been breached, is there scope for a warning or guidance before penalties are imposed?
Yes, so I think the Pension Funds Act allows trustees to get expert advice on matters where they lack expertise. So really, you should be consulting with your legal advisor if you are not sure about what the law provides. There's also a principle in law: ignorance of the law is not an excuse. But we've got to be empathetic towards these current changes. At the same time, we've got a duty to enforce the law. So there is a middle ground in terms of enforceable undertakings. We've been doing it with Directive 8. So an enforceable undertaking is where the regulated person or the regulated entity gives the regulator an undertaking that they will desist from certain conducts, and if they again in the future breach that, then there are consequences to follow. So I think that's really a good tool, and trustees should really, when we come up with these situations, should really embrace that concept, because it's a new concept, and I think it's something really positive.
All right, question for Fikile. I know she tried to put as much as possible in her slides, so I wouldn't ask her a question. But I, in fact, do have one for you. So one of the questions that came in, which I thought was for you, was, is the FSCA open to considering tracked changes in rule amendments so that it is possible for the fund to easily consider the previous wording of a rule?
Thanks, Fiona. When I first saw the question, actually, I thought it was a little bit selfish because it says, so that it is possible for the fund to easily consider the previous wording. A rule amendment is a legal document. It's signed in terms of the Pension Funds Act. So I would really love to know, I know the gentleman, if you can just paint the picture of what this document actually will look like. What are you submitting to the authority? Am I going to receive a document with track changes unsigned and a document properly signed with the changes actually incorporated, clean, neat, ready for consideration?
You must accept.
So, no.
The track changes.
So the answer is no, not for the purposes of considering registration. But again, I find it a little bit questionable. We do have copies of previous rules, previous rule amendments that we use to compare new submissions. I don't know what this is meant to do really. So hence I'm saying I felt it was a little bit self-serving. They can keep it for their own use.
But maybe if the trustees here, they could just help us understand the context.
Is there any trustee here who would like to submit their rule amendments as track changes?
There might be a reason, and it's not to victimize anyone. There might be a genuine reason why they feel it might help having a set of tracked, changed document and a final one.
And maybe the difference is you might use, almost like a trustees have a consolidated set or a working set that they work from, but that would not be the set that you would get registered. Maybe that's the difference. Yeah, but I'm wondering if
It's actually really just to make, I think, with respect, your lives easier as well, if you have a tracked set of rules. Not necessarily the set that needs to be approved, but to track the changes.
So and maybe see what exactly is being changed.
Yes. track the changes in, so rules in markup, in track?
I am a very suspicious person.
Okay, so this session will go down as like the big hot issues were prescribed assets, transformation, and tracked rule changes. I don't know, maybe you should take that offline. Maybe you should show her what it will look like, and then we can take it from there. One last question, and then I'm going to open it up, and this is back to Olano again. Olano's views on the ping-pong battle between the pension funds adjudicator and the tribunal, where trustees find that a decision gets taken, from the pension funds adjudicator to the tribunal and then back to the adjudicator again. Do you think that is a useful structure?
So which structure, the tribunal structure?
The fact that the tribunal can only refer it back or dismiss it, they can't make their own decision. So the issue then, let's say it was 37C decision, the trustees the decision goes to the adjudicator makes a decision. It gets overridden by the tribunal and goes right back to the adjudicator again. Then it can be taken on appeal again to the tribunal, and the tribunal sends it back to the adjudicator. That is the ping pong battle that could happen.
Yeah. It's a tricky one.
Maybe I can save my voice here.
Any volunteers? Stephanus, are you ready to answer this one?
So yeah, it's the way the legislation is structured. Unfortunately, we can't just willy-nilly change the legislation, but remember the tribunal is made up of a retired judge and very qualified people, experts in the field, who look at the application for reconsideration. So the decision maker, in this instance, the pension funds adjudicator, would have to obviously take full account of what is being said. And we've seen with the public protector how there can be personal cost orders against a decision maker if they don't act in good faith. I think it is in theory it can be a ping pong going back and forth, but I think in practice it's not really going to happen that way. I think if a matter is sent back to the adjudicator, I'm not speaking on her behalf, but I'm just saying if I was in her shoes, I'd take it very seriously. Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe it's one of those unintended consequences. We'll see play out. All right. Any questions from the audience now? Chantal.
Thanks, Fiona. Just following on from that tribunal's powers, why in certain instances can they substitute, but with the PFA as a decision maker they can't? Do you have any insight into why it was drafted in that manner?
Look, that's a good question. I'd like to ask that question of the legislators as well, but I can't really. I know there are certain instances, there are certain categories of decisions that can be set aside, but I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure about it.
We'll ask National Treasury. Right. Any other questions? Stephanus, he's going to ask a question, or is he going to give us an answer?
The principle of deference, you'll know what the principle of deference is. It's written into all administrative law in PAJA. Even courts must show deference to the actual expert decision maker. So that's the principle that informs that distinction, why some will be referred back and not substituted.
Yes, Jan has a question.
No, I have a little comment,
Oh.
as Olano likes saying it. Look, if I knock on Fikile's door and I say I need assistance, only to discover that it's actually Naheem who's supposed to assist me, I assume that your office will make sure that that person will be directed to the right office, and we deal and make sure that we smash silo mentality. That's the comment I need to make, and I think there's a transition. Let's allow the institution to find its feet, because there's no paralysis. The institution is working and continue serving the retirement fund industry. That's my comment.
Thank you. All right, there was a question over there.
Yeah, my question refers to an earlier statement that was made in the keynote speaker with Olano. It referred to that 42 billion rand that's worth on unclaimed benefits. My question really is, what is really being done at the FSCA that relates to some sort of enforcement on funds to get tracing agents to be appointed, and probably a couple of them, because different strategies are used all the time. What we've picked up is that there's a reluctance, especially from administrators, to really get this sorted, because it's not in their best interest. There's admin charges that are sitting on those funds on a monthly basis. And, these companies then, as administrators, get to have the benefit of having good monies that are coming in as revenues. Thank you.
Thanks. It's a good question, and I'm going to ask Takalani just to assist and share the pain. Look, there's another way of dealing with that. You can literally consolidate all the unclaimed benefits under one fund, under the FSCA. Or you can leave it to the current system and standardize issues like how much they charge for administering those funds. So there are ways you can deal with it. Probably it might make sense to consolidate all those funds, because I think it's probably the only way you'll deal with those issues around administrators charging fees on those funds. But Takalani, would you want to come in, my dear?
Yeah. So for the better part of last year and the other year, from 2017 onwards, from when the database was up and running, you'll know that we did taking regulation to the people, where we were assisting people to complete forms. The website was up and running from August 2017. Administrators are not doing enough. Let me just put it out there, not doing enough. So we've set up the database. Most administrators don't respond to the possible matches. People come back to us with those letters, and we have to follow up with the administrator. There is no proactive monitoring also from the trustees' side to say, show us whether you've had any possible matches that have been sent through to you. So we're having all of these tracing agents popping up everywhere, charging people exorbitant fees and costs to get access, which is wrong. It's just plainly wrong. People try. They by the time they come to us, they've been to 3 different administrators. Call centers, I don't even want to comment on them. Walk-in centers, they show us proof. They show us proof of emails that they've sent when no one responds. Everybody just decides it's not worth my time. So what we have to work on now is fixing that database, because the data is really not in a good state. And I think Makgompi's team has now mentioned record keeping and data. We'll work on those fees. So if we have to say no more fees on those unclaimed benefits, let's then see how much it's not affecting revenues. Tracing agents are coming to us every day saying we've knocked on administrators' doors and they won't let us in. And we've got people that want to inquire. So there's this, I don't want to close off in terms of competition from administrators that are using preferred service providers that have been using the same methods for years that are not working. And it's really perhaps just a symptom of the trustees also transferring to unclaimed benefits funds and then not worrying about it. There are some funds that are doing really good work. So there are some funds that are doing really good work. But it doesn't look good, and it's nice to say it is a historical problem, but the unclaimed benefits are actually growing. Not the amount, the number of members is growing. And that shouldn't be happening. If everybody is saying we've got these wonderful systems, we're implementing, collecting proper information on contributions, not in this day and age should people still not be found by somebody. But still, there are administrators today that aren't collecting ID numbers. So it's only being done if we need to do a Section 14. Which is shocking. So we're working on a lot of things, unclaimed benefit policy to standardize, as Olano said. What should be done, the same as what ASISA has got, what should trustees be doing. But we'll have workshops and we'll deal with those funds where we know there's a lot. These dormant members, these different definitions that are going around in industry, we need to clear that up as well. Because it's actually impacting the number of unclaimed benefits. So it's nice to say it's a dormant member. I don't know what a dormant member is. I don't know if they're going to wake up at some point and be resurrected, but I want to sort that out because it makes no sense to have them be classified differently, but they're not described or defined in the rules. They're just there. So let me not, thank you very much.
Fiona, if I can just also come in, we also will be interrogating the fees around the different types of funds. So across RAs, we'll be looking at outliers. Across umbrella funds, we'll be looking at outliers. Across paid up funds. Because why are you still charging the same fee structure on a paid up fund? There's no contributions coming in that needs to be allocated. You're sitting with a pot of money that's already invested. So there'll certainly be some discussion around it. And coming back to Takalani's point of the types of members that are in the rules versus what's in the legislation versus what you put in your financial statements. We've paved the way to say we will not charge fees on unclaimed benefit members, levies. I think the industry must also follow our example.
So maybe just to conclude, and if I hear you, Takalani, I mean, what you are suggesting that maybe medium to long term consolidating those funds might not be a bad idea, because then you'll have a single tracing agent who you can control and crack the whip if they're not doing their job. Then you can deal with the fees issue. So maybe that's something as industry probably need to start factoring in, that we might have to go that route and consolidate those unclaimed benefits.
Sorry, there was a question right at the back. The gentleman at the back has been waving his arm around for...
On the issue of the funds on transformation doing their own verification of the companies, my understanding is that a B certificate is a verified and audited certificate. Why should fund do an additional costs on that? Because I think that might also be an issue of funds saying, but this is double cost for us. And if there are issues about the verified certificate, while SANAS is there, why don't they go to SANAS or the BE commissioners? I'm just trying to say, in terms of the cost issue that Naheem has raised, that the funds do that their own with that. That might be a challenge for funds to do that.
Sorry, we struggled a bit.
Yeah, could you maybe speak a little bit closer to the mic? And you were talking about the costs of the double costs.
The double cost of doing verification.
Yes.
For BEE, the triple BEE, because the verification certificate is already been verified. And if there are any problems with the verification agency, the fund can take it to SANAS or the BE commissioner. So, and Naheem indicated earlier that funds should do their own. I think that's where my concern is.
So Naheem, if the fund gets the certificate from their service provider, why does the fund itself need to appoint somebody to verify what the fund's already provided? If the fund provides you with, the service provider provides their, certificate from the commissioner.
Yeah, so it's not, like I said, it's something that we're playing around with at the moment in terms of ideas for the guidance notice. But, one of the biggest frauds that takes place in this country and people don't talk about is fronting practices. There's a lot of fronting practices that are taking place. Mr. Mashlangu, you'll bear me out here. People find ways to chippo the system, to say that they are BE compliant when they're not BE compliant. And really that's the intention behind it. If it's, if it comes at a cost, so sometimes, to achieve the greater good, we might have to look at that. But like I say, it's still something that we are considering, and we'll take on board what you said. Thank you.